I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We have a lot of great stories for you tonight, including part 2 of our report involving strippers in Washington state who say they want changes in their workplace. For example, did you know they have to pay the club to get their opportunity to dance? We'll hear directly from them. And I'll give you my opinion on the Oregon legislature's efforts to recriminalize drugs. But first, we're talking about an alarming rise in guns at school. The surprising results found by our investigative reporter, Kyle Aboshi. That's our big story tonight. Across the state of Oregon, the number of students caught bringing a gun to school has skyrocketed compared to just 5 years ago. It's a disturbing trend, one that has often kept secret until right now. Investigative reporter Kyle Aboshi found these guns are showing up in every type of community: urban, suburban, and rural.
January 7th, 2023, 7:39 p.m. Shots are fired outside Franklin High School in southeast Portland. A basketball game is halted. The crowd clears the gym. Police find a semi-automatic handgun in the school parking lot and arrest a 15-year-old boy. The case highlights an alarming trend. Guns are being found in Oregon schools, and the numbers are soaring. To better understand the problem, KGW filed a public records request for student discipline records with the Oregon Department of Education. And here's what we found. Last school year, 48 students in Oregon were caught bringing a gun to school. That's a significant increase from the 18 cases identified during the last pre-pandemic year. Nearly half those cases involved the state's largest district, Portland Public. But guns showed up in every type of community: urban, suburban, and rural. Additionally, last year, 37 students brought other weapons to school, including airsoft guns, stun guns, and BB guns.
Is this an accurate reflection of the number of guns that may actually be on campus?
I suspect it's the tip of the iceberg.
Kathleen Carlson of the OHSU Gun Violence Prevention Research Center says the numbers reflect a society awash in guns.
The leading cause of death for children in this country is firearm injuries.
The weapons were discovered in backpacks, bags, lockers, cars, and pockets. Some were brought to school by accident, others to show off. Typically, researchers say the student doesn't intend to harm anyone. They just don't feel safe at school or on the way to school. What
we do know from research also is that kids who tend to carry guns, including on school campuses, have experienced or witnessed violence in their communities. The growing number of guns seized in Oregon schools mirrors a national trend: a rise in school shootings. These tragedies have prompted many districts to revisit the controversial presence of school resource officers. Some school districts, including Portland, have tested metal detectors or weapon screening systems. And in Klamath Falls, schools installed artificial intelligence-driven technology to detect if someone is openly carrying a gun on school property.
They can work, but really that's about mitigation, so waiting until the problem comes to your door. We would rather get ahead of the problem and do some early intervention, some prevention.
The Salem-Keizer School District pioneered a school safety program more than 20 years ago that focuses on preventing bad things from happening in the first place, like a gun incident.
And we don't want kids going down that path, so we want to get involved as early as possible.
School psychologist Courtney McCarthy explains a team works to assess risk, then provides support, and students play an important role.
Kids know what's going on with other kids, so we want to make sure that they are reporting when they have concerns.
Safe Oregon is a statewide school safety tip line. Records show over the past 6 years, there's been a significant uptick in the number of tips related to weapons and threats of planned school attacks. While that may be concerning to some, others suggest it's a sign the system is working. People reported concerns, and most guns were confiscated before anyone fired.
Kyle joins me now. Super interesting story. How old are these kids?
Good question. The state data, they wouldn't provide specifics about the students. Portland Public did provide us some of that information, though. Said the vast majority of them are high school kids, although 4 of the incidents did involve middle school kids.
Ooh, that's scary.
Pretty
well, I
young.
mean, it's scary for all of them. And what kind of punishment do they face?
Yeah, so in Oregon, it's required that if a student brings a gun to school, mandatory 1-year expulsion.
Wow. Okay. And then why don't we hear about this more?
Yeah, it's often not publicly reported for a couple of reasons, really. One, juvenile records are protected. Also, schools can't reveal a lot of specifics about this because of student privacy laws. So oftentimes we just don't hear about it.
You would think as a parent, though, you would want to know that's happening at your kid's school. Yeah. All right. Interesting stuff. Thanks, Kyle. Moving on now to an update on House Bill 4002. That's the bill to recriminalize drugs in Oregon. Last night, we showed you several moments from yesterday's work session, which ended with a bipartisan group of lawmakers voting 10-2 to move the bill from committee to the full House and full Senate. Today, the bill had its second reading in the House. The first reading came at the beginning of the session before it was sent to that committee. Tomorrow, 4002 is scheduled to have its third reading in that chamber, and right after that, a full vote on the bill can be held. So we'll be keeping a close eye on the House in Salem tomorrow to see if the bill advances. Right now, there's nothing scheduled on the Senate side, but sources have told me it will be heard there soon, and it is very likely to pass. If it's approved in both chambers, it's up to the governor, Governor Kotek, to either sign the bill or veto it. The last day of the short session is Sunday, March 10th. That's just 11 days from right now. And here's my take on this bill. First, I voted yes on Measure 110 because, well, like a lot of you, it made sense to me to treat drug addiction as a health issue, not a criminal issue. But it really has not worked out the way I think a lot of us hoped. And I think that all but the most hardcore advocates now agree it's time for a change. Polling shows a majority of Oregon voters would vote to reverse Measure 110, period, full stop. And a reform group has promised to put the question up to a vote of the people if those lawmakers don't make real change. So the Oregon legislature is taking action. They've created a plan that focuses on many progressive ideals, including prioritizing treatment over punishment when it comes to addicts. If they're caught by police, they get 3 chances to go into treatment before getting a jail sentence. That might make Oregon a national leader in giving people a chance to get off drugs and stay out of jail. But unlike Measure 110, this new plan also brings the possibility of punishment for people who refuse to get help. And in my opinion, that's just as important. And not because I think drug users should be locked up, but because I think a lot of drug users are just not thinking straight. And given the choice, they're not going to go into treatment if their option is to stay right where they are doing the drugs they're doing. That is what we see happening right now in our streets. And how's that working out for us? Really not that well. The combination, in my opinion, of deflection, which happens before the arrest, and consequences, that is the secret sauce that I think is going to make this thing work. But let's get back to the legislature. I reserve the right to lambaste anyone from any party when I think they're doing something dumb that does not serve you, the public. And I feel the same way about our government agencies. And I'm going to use my 33 years as a reporter in Oregon to decide when that's happening. But I have to say, it's been a long time since I've seen Oregon lawmakers from both parties work together on such a controversial bill to compromise and hammer out a solution that is good for the entire state. And that's exactly what I see happening right now with House Bill 4002. Both parties should be applauded. This new plan not only recriminalizes drugs and gives lots of options for treatment instead of a criminal record, it also makes it a lot easier to prosecute drug dealers and to hit them even harder if they're peddling their drugs near treatment centers or our schools. There have also been a lot of compromises along the way here. When the work started on this overhaul, there was a lot of back and forth, you probably remember, on whether possession of drugs should be a Class C misdemeanor, the lowest possible misdemeanor family, or a Class A, which is the highest misdemeanor possible. Well, instead of one side winning and the other side losing, lawmakers wisely decided they'd create a whole brand new misdemeanor, an unclassified misdemeanor, that will do what both sides want without anyone having to lose face in the process. That was a smart idea. And while the marijuana tax money that's now flowing to Measure 110 programs will keep flowing, there's also new money, more than $200 million that will fund things like treatment centers and sobering centers. And that's good too. Finally, lawmakers also compromised on those deflection programs that let people get help instead of getting arrested. At one point, many lawmakers were insisting that those were mandatory for every county in Oregon. But those of you watching in Eastern Oregon or out on the coast, you realize that what works for Portland or Beaverton may not work for your towns. Rural areas are sick and tired of solutions that are aimed at big city problems and then applied to them as well. And so this new plan allows counties to set up deflection programs if they want to. It also offers them grant money to entice them to do it. Right now, 23 out of 36 counties have said they'll do it. I'm told that covers 85% of the population in Oregon. That's good policy, and it's good lawmaking, and a hopeful sign to me that our state has true leaders in the legislature tackling some of our biggest and most controversial problems. And I know it's not easy to ignore the hysterical cries of the advocates who now insist their way of thinking is correct and everyone else is wrong and that HB 4002 is a disaster. But so far, lawmakers are ignoring that, ignoring it, and listening to the majority of Oregonians who do want change. You should actually think about looking up your representative and senator and send them an email telling them that you're proud of the work they've done on this bill, House Bill 4002, and that you hope they vote yes. Also, it's worth applauding the group threatening the voter initiative to overturn Measure 110 if lawmakers did not take action. That credible threat, that move, gave lawmakers the political cover that they needed to make the changes that they have. Lawmakers are correctly able to tell people who don't want change that if they don't create a common sense solution to Measure 110, well, voters would do much worse. I think HB 4002 is going to be signed by the governor, and then I believe the initiative will go away. In my opinion, it is time to put Measure 110 behind us. It didn't work. Oregon's legislature is on track to do that, and my hat is off to them. They've accomplished a very hard task at what appears to be a comprehensive solution. Can you imagine what our country would be like if we could make that happen on a national level? Something to dream about. That's my opinion. You don't have to agree, but you do have to communicate. What do you think? You know what to do. This is where you get talking to us. Send us an email, give us a call. The email address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, the city of Portland has been sued a number of times regarding homeless camps, but a recent suit appears really interesting and the first of its kind. It's tied to a deadly crash from 2 years ago. Blair Best is going to explain the suit's novel approach when The Story returns. We've covered lawsuits involving homeless camping quite a bit on this show. In fact, we had a deep dive just yesterday. But we've not talked about a lawsuit quite like this one. An insurance company says the city of Portland is partly at fault for a fatal crash along Southeast Powell Boulevard 2 years ago. The city's involvement? The suit charges that one of the drivers could not see oncoming traffic because of homeless tents and tall grass. Here's Blair Best.
May 14th, 2022.
I do remember it, yes.
Is a day many who live off Southeast Powell Boulevard would like to forget.
The worst case scenario.
Oh, how horrific it was, and how it took them a long time to clean it up.
They're talking about a deadly crash. It happened at this intersection of Southeast 62nd Avenue and Powell Boulevard. A Lyft driver was crossing Powell when a motorcyclist crashed into his car and died. The Lyft driver suffered serious injuries.
You hear the motorcycles screaming down the street, and all of a sudden they weren't, and it was some sort of big crash.
Jeff, who lives a block away, thought only one thing.
I figured how it happened. Somebody was pulling out there and they can't see.
At the time of the crash, homeless camps and tall grass blocked the sidewalks and medians, and that's been an ongoing problem there.
You can't turn left. It's impossible. You can't see around the tents who's coming.
You just kind of either have to do a different route, or you take your chances some of the time pulling out there because you can't fully see.
On Tuesday, and as first reported by the Willamette Week, Arizona-based insurance company for the Lyft driver sued the city of Portland for $1 million in damages, alleging homeless camps and tall grass blocked the Lyft driver's view, causing the fatal crash. Roughly 3 months before the fatal crash, the city of Portland declared an emergency, banning all camping due to safety reasons along high crash corridors, including where the crash happened here along Southeast Powell Boulevard. The lawsuit argues under that emergency order, the city had a duty to maintain and control that intersection, including removing homeless encampments. The lawsuit says the city ignored the dangerous conditions and made the intersection unreasonably unsafe for the public.
When somebody has a tent that you can't see around and you can't pull out into the road, that's a safety issue. So that's more than just a homeless issue. You're talking about people dying, which has happened.
The city told us they weren't able to comment on the pending litigation. I will also point out, this is not the first time the city has been sued over camps blocking public rights of way. Just a few months after that crash, the city was sued over homeless camps blocking ADA access on sidewalks. And in June, the city banned homeless camping on all public property, but they faced another lawsuit over that and are still waiting for it to make its way through the courts before they can start enforcing that ban. Blair Best, KGW News.
Thanks, Blair. Still to come on the story, we're heading back to the state of Washington, where strippers are demanding changes from the legislature for things they call basic workplace safety. Time is running out on the bill, but we'll explain what they want and how it differs from things operating here in Oregon when the story returns. Strippers in Washington state say they need more protection at work. Yes, some of it's what you might guess. Mandatory security workers to protect them and panic buttons so they can call for help. But they also want a standard fee for how much they have to pay to dance at a club. Guessing you didn't really know that's how that works, right? Me either. Joyce Taylor from our affiliate in Seattle has the story.
There is a perception that, frankly, strippers are stupid, that strippers are incapable. When people hear the word sex work, they're just like, oh, you're a prostitute.
I came away at the end of the night, looked at the money in my hands, and was like, I should have done this a long time ago.
One of the fundamental flaws of the Washington industry is that we are treated as the commodity.
Let's start with the fact that you're all licensed. This is a legal profession in Washington. So what are the conditions that you currently work under that don't work for you?
There is no policy, no regulation, no law telling clubs what sort of rights we have as contractors. We're alienated and we're cut off from resources and we're cut off from basic human rights like security and fair wage and equitable treatment by management. And that's what makes the work hard.
All of these dance clubs, the 11 that exist in Washington, are fully supported by dancers.
Yes.
They do not sell alcohol. It's not legal in Washington. Their full income is supported by dancers.
By the fees that we pay. So I paid $185 every night to work. I could show up whenever I wanted, but that fee was so different across different dancers, and especially dancers of color. The fees seemed so unpredictable. The club would register what you didn't pay as back rent. I saw over many years how clubs even used that debt to control girls, to force them to work shifts they didn't want to work, to force them to work with customers they didn't want to work with.
There's a lot of room for racism, discrimination, playing favorites. And so our policy not only caps house fees at $150, it also prevents dancers from paying more than they're taking home.
What part of the legislation would increase your safety in terms of your health and the risk that you face now in the workplace?
So much. Even financial stability is a huge factor for safety. When we think about the risk for trafficking and the risk for physical assault and violence, those things are often linked and predicted by financial instability.
There's accountability for clubs to show up, and it makes sure that there are panic buttons in the VIP rooms that are subtle and that we can actually reach, that the customer blacklist means something. We have more options in who we dance with, and that's going to inherently make us safer.
We are also decriminalizing portions of dancer conduct because from the get, pretty much as soon as we start working, we are criminalized, and that's really disempowering.
What parts of dancing are being criminalized?
Even as simply as being unclothed, right? We are only allowed to be unclothed on the stage.
Some clubs, when you're hired, they will say you have to get naked on stage. But then you have customers approaching you and trying to do things that they don't even know are against the law. So you're risking breaking the law constantly at every little turn.
So when you're dancing on stage, you are welcome to take off your outfit completely, but then the moment that a customer comes up to throw money on the stage, you've broken the law.
Law enforcement in the state can hold that over our heads. You know, we don't even know when we're breaking the law and when we're not because it's written so vague.
How would alcohol be a game changer for dance clubs, which currently cannot sell alcohol?
It means that dancers are not the only source of revenue. It means that there's more agency oversight making sure that things are safe. It means that a broader and more general population of the public is attending.
In your mind, alcohol changes everything, doesn't it?
It does.
Absolutely.
I think most dancers feel that way. It's often said that alcohol is prohibited in clubs in order to keep dancers safe, but I have never met a dancer that said that they prefer to work in a club that doesn't serve alcohol.
See why you see so many of us go to Oregon.
Yeah.
Because there's general knowledge that we are safer there.
Every state does, even Utah does. I mean, the reality is that there is alcohol in clubs now. It's just not regulated.
Or they're drinking outside and then coming in
their
and going back
cars
outside
and coming in.
With alcohol service, there is money for safety controls, and there's actual motivation to install those safety controls because they could potentially lose their liquor license.
What is the one thing that you want people to understand about what you do as a dancer that they do not get.
No matter what people think, there is a fact that certain women just can't get other jobs. That this is a last resort, and then the resort after that is working on the street. And you put them in a strip club, you put them in a controlled environment where there are safety precautions, and we want better safety precautions.
It is an avenue of self-expression and empowerment that could exist in a truly safe and inclusive manner, and the only reason it does not is because of the regulations and the laws and the stigma around it.
Now, as you heard, many of the strippers in Washington will travel to Oregon, where they say they feel safer, where strip clubs sell alcohol and security is a given. We'll have that part of the story coming your way tomorrow. As for the bill they're fighting for in Olympia, the clock is ticking. I was texting with Joyce Taylor just before we came on the air tonight. She says it is getting close, though. It's just one step away from the governor. It will die, though, if it does not get to the governor and get passage by Friday. So we'll see. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. I'm off tomorrow night, by the way. I'm getting a root canal. Doesn't that sound like fun? I think it'll be fine. Not to worry, though. You'll be in great hands, and I'll be back on Friday. The good stuff is coming your way next. Have a good night.